Testing. I provide that guy. So everybody, up next we're gonna have Cheryl McDonald. You have to be like next to it. Like,
Sego, everyone, it's really an honor and a privilege, and it's just what I needed to have you surround me with love on what is known as Valentine's Day, and the day that we honor our stolen and missing sisters. I'm looking at the sign over here, and it's, justice for our sisters, and a stop to the injustices that the families and survivors of violence are and have been experiencing for decades. I testified here in Montreal, the sacred city of my ancestors and the Mohawks of all three communities. I testified, I remember talking about the violence that we're all born in, the violence that we're conceived in, the violence that we find at school, at home, at longhouse, at ceremonies, in play, wherever we go, there are humans. And I didn't know this growing up in the States. My parents were displaced. Lateral violence was something I learned about as an adult, as a young mother, as a young grandmother, and it's something that I have been looking at since I testified about the details of my sister when she went missing in 1988 one night from our parents' home in Aguesasne. My sister and I were the youngest of 4 daughters born to 2 Mohawk young people who were raised in Genesadage and Aguesasne, but for circumstances beyond their control or even beyond their awareness, they were driven away from the reserve life and raised us in the United States. So my sisters and I, we had an American education as opposed to a Canadian or a Quebecois or a on Mohawk reserve education. But we did stay connected to family. So I've been in Canada for 35 years, and when you come back to the reserve, you don't feel like you fit in. In fact, you're told, go back where you came from. And that's a real issue that still exists today. I'm a grandmother. I have 5 grandchildren, and I know that they're going to feel that too, because, they're from different reserves. If one parent's from another reserve, I got that all my life, and I testified growing up in 4 Iroquois Haudenosaunee communities, and you get told right away who you are and who you aren't, and so identity is stripped from you. And we were raised with the Mohawk language. We were raised with the Mohawk activities of gardening, gathering, fishing at night, basket making, beading, working. My parents both worked and paid taxes, and that was way before they were even registered in Canada under the Indian Act. So I became registered as a young adult when I crossed that border, and I can tell you 35 years later we're Indian actors of Canada. And before I testified, I left a career in human resource skills development, and so part of my healing journey was to let go of this notion of working for what, working for who, working with people who were helping themselves and not helping their own people who needed the help. I walked away from a big salary, but inside I felt like I didn't deserve that wage when I saw people working in construction, working in schools, working in hospitals, working to help maintain a culture. And today I live in Genesadage. I've lived there for 35 years. I met a young Ellen Gabriel. I was a young mother. new to the reserve, and there's the Oka crisis blowing up right in front of me. And I stayed during that summer, but because I was traumatized by losing a sister and having the community not help us search for her, the police couldn't be bothered. And we hear that today, that mentality in policing still exists, that, oh, she's another drinker, oh, she always runs off. Irregardless, our own people didn't help us because we weren't raised there. We were born there and left, and that wasn't our decision as young little girls. There was no work in the 60s. There was no housing. And so I felt like in Canada and today, living in Genesadage, living in the violence that we read about in the paper, looking at the destruction of the land, I think to myself, you want more land? Look at what you did to the small pieces that are left. I have in my own family had family members sell land, steal land, and take land and destroy it. And I'm supposed to be proud that I'm a Mohawk? I'm proud because I was raised by Mohawks who knew the value of work, who had integrity. I came to Canada homeless, and my sister, she died a year later in Aguazasne, and to this day I felt angry when I looked at my testimony, and today I say maybe she was suicidal, she was sad, she told us she was unhappy, but they did not look for her. And so when I watched the Pope come through Canada in Quebec, and I saw the trauma just brought up by the elders, now I know why as kids we saw the elders hiding in bushes drinking, because they were those abused children that denied us grandparents, denied us aunt and uncles, denied us parents. We are all traumatized kids in adult bodies, and if we're not addicted, we need to stand up and help the ones that are. I came through from the metro line from Laval, and I came out of the rabbit hole at the Atwater Metro, and I saw our people sitting in a subway, beautiful young women and men, and the culture that we live in today, whether it's here in Montreal or in Genesadage, it is not our culture. We are all trying to be somebody else. We're all living in a province of language racists, and we need to stop and say, how are we treating each other as humans? We're supposed to love and take care of this land. I was lucky that an aunt who left as a young woman saw this young mother looking for a home, and she gave me a little parcel of land, and that's in the village of Oka. I call it Oka Poka Choka Moka Smoka, because that is what that place is. And the reserve is just a big tax-free, whatever you want, ass, gas, grass, guns, you name it. I'm not making this up. Since I testified, I have been looking at my people, and I realized when they came here, these colonists, they took us out of our families. They took us from our parents. They took us from our extended families. They took us from the land, and they taught us to read and write that language that they learned from us. And did they tell us fairy tales that we're supposed to live in the past and live like the past and learn our language and everything's going to be great? I lost my language for English, and I can't work because I don't speak French. Well, I also went back to the longhouse and I learned the roles of the men and women. We are supposed to take care of our children. I would have crawled on broken glass and fire to save my children, but my sister didn't get that chance because our men are broken. They come from the same trauma, and I'm saying, if you're listening to me and you see what I see and you read what I read and you feel helpless, then at least we're on the same page. I have worked my butt off trying to make change for my people, and I made change for myself. I built a house, a meager little house, next to mansions of fast, easy money. Your tax-free status card can get you all the booze and weed you want, and you gas, and you can turn around and sell it to the Quebecois. So you don't even need a status card anymore in Oka. But I need one when I walk in a store and pull out my card so I can buy clothes. Those merchants look at my card and say, it's expired. We can't honor your tax exemption. I said, oh yeah? Go to Okapoka Choka Mocha and see what I can buy without a tax card. So I am angry that my people are blind to the culture that they uphold. They want to be plastic Barbie dolls, and the men want to beat us down and treat women like Kleenex. They want to put their elders in an old folks home and let somebody else care for them, visit them, feed them. If our language is so important, why aren't we speaking it in the feeling of love, in the action of love and caring? I have been threatened to shut the hell up. We don't have any cops in going to the reserve, and the Grand Chief called it the Wild Wild West. Well, the SQ sure come to my house this summer when I raised hell, when settlers built on land my mother, my sister, my daughters, my nieces could never build a house on, because our own people have a settler mentality, and they dress up and play Indian when it suits them. And you'll see us in film. We're just good enough to be raped and be protesters. I'm more than that. I'm a warrior woman. I'm not hurting anybody, and I want my children to know that their grandmother is someone who isn't ashamed to walk the streets of Montreal and tell anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm a proud Mohawk. But I'm ashamed of the state of mind of my people. They aren't warriors anymore. They are settler merchants, and I hope they hear this message loud. Our people are addicted to alcohol, and that's why they're vulnerable. I heard so many stories of people going into bars and never coming out because there's trap doors and there's predators waiting for women putting things in the drink. And our sons and our husbands and our uncles and grandfathers, they're not safe either, because a good Indian is a dead Indian. Nyawatgoa for being here, because I need to know people care, because when I go home, I go back in my house and mind my business, just like they taught us when they took us out of the land. Stay in your house and mind your business while we mind ours. Nyawatgoa, Onagi, Galongwa, thank you for being here. And it's good to be back in the city. I took myself off social media because, people seem to think I walk on water. And this year, the Oka Ice Bridge didn't freeze, so I couldn't walk on water this year. But thank you, Mark, for being here. There's so many people doing good in all professions, and they're there. We just need to weed out the ones who are there for themselves, and they know who they are, because they won't cross paths with me anymore. Onagi, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for your kind words. So, I guess I'm next, and I'm a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie. My name is Janice Tamavagbibo. I'm the research coordinator for the Ishkoi project. In my role, I had to build a database for MMIW because it's non-existent in Quebec. They have it in British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, but the more further you go near Quebec and after Quebec, it's non-existent. And in my role, everybody told me, you know what, it's gonna be almost impossible to find all of these names. Well, guess what, everybody? I found over 200 names of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and 100 names of Indigenous men that were murdered and are missing. And just so you guys have an idea, I think we're almost about maybe 200 people, Imagine if all of us were murdered here tonight, just because you're Indigenous. Where's that bring us? I also want to talk about one thing that people don't talk about much is when Indigenous woman passes away and it's ruled super quickly as a suicide or overdose. Not a lot of people talk about these situations. And I asked my mom for the coroner's report, and the first phrase of the coroner's report was, "This client is obese and unclean." Well, this was my mom, and she was the best. And she's not here today. And one thing that people say about Indigenous people is to get over it. You know, it's the past, move on. We don't say about that about positive things. Then why would she move on of the trauma that's been sorry, I'm a little bit mixed up in my feelings. Why would we move from the legacy of residential schools, intergenerational trauma? This is something that affects every Indigenous person, residential schools. And we need to do change. I've done my database, over 200 names. RCMP estimated only 46 names. That's 4 times higher of what RCMP estimated. And yet, no government official approached us to know the names, who are these victims. Well, you came here tonight to honor every single one of them. So thank you. And now we're gonna go to the throat singing with Nina and her daughter.
Hi. Oh, geez, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm very honored to be here with you, and I would like to do an exercise. I would like all the women to stand in the middle and all the men to stand outside. All the women stand in the middle, please. And I want all the men to stand around us. All the women in the middle and all the men around us in the back. All the men stand around us and all the women in the middle. Every single man stand around us and protect us and make a circle around the women that are standing here in this square. This is how it should be. You know, as women, we support each other and we protect each other and we stand next to each other. And we're supposed to be lifting each other up. And we grieve with each other. Every time we lose a woman, it's not just the woman, but it's all of us. Every time I hear a woman's missing on Turtle Island, it does not matter. Because we're connected. Indigenous or not. In this circle right now, we have strong women that are standing for the women that cannot be here. You did the walk from Atwater here. This is the end of our journey tonight. But the women who have lost their lives, that's the end of their journey. And as we walk home, I want you to remember how safe it feels to be in this circle with the men around us. And that's your job as men, is to protect our women. We should not be scared to walk on the streets. I'm a mother. This is my daughter Sierra. I have another daughter who's 12. And I have a son who's 31, and I have 2 grandkids. Why should we be scared to walk on the streets, no matter what time of day, no matter what time of night? As men, this is your job to protect us. Remember this tonight, and when you walk home, remember that you need to spread that. And as women, know that we can protect ourselves, but also we support each other. Lean on each other. Don't go through this alone. We've had lost so many of our women. Don't do it in solitary, because this is not what we're meant to do.